What is up, everyone, and welcome back to the Ratchet Motors YouTube channel. So we got another video for the Triumph today. If you didn't see the last one, I'll put the link here, wherever it goes. But we actually got it running finally, so I'm super excited about that. And what that means is now that we've seen some life, it's time to actually get this bike back together. So this video is going to be all the odds and ends of getting this bike back together. We're going to mount the seat, put all the side panels on, any wiring for the rear lights or the brake light. We're going to do that all today. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So we see here we have one of our side panels, and this is a good starting point. We have one on that fits on no issues. You see it mounts with the two pegs there on the top and then a bolt on the bottom. But like I mentioned, that someone had gone ahead and already started chopping up this bike. So you'll notice here that on this side, the peg is all messed up and we actually don't have the one in the rear. So our first step is really going to be getting this side panel up here and mounted. We'll remake some brackets to mount that up here, and then we can actually locate our seat. And one thing to keep in mind, or one thing to notice with these side panels, is they actually have a bushing, which has gone missing somewhere along the way. Probably was never included with the bike, like most of the things I have here. So what I'm actually going to do is measure up the bushing from my other side, and I'm going to 3D print a plastic piece just to fill that void. So one nice thing of the 3D printer is we can make some of those little small pieces. So I'll print out my bushing so I can properly line this up as far as the mounting screw. And then I'll go ahead and make my new brackets here to actually mount that side panel. And then once we have the side panel on, we'll start figuring out how we're going to mount the seat. And that's that little bushing I was referring to. So I'll get some dimensions on this. We can see even on this side it's pretty beat up. So I'll get some dimensions on that. And I'll print one out for each side so we have something uniform on both sides here. It should be a little fun, quick printing project. So I'll quickly get that drawn up in Creo and sent over to my printer. I'm also going to print two other bushings at the same time. We have these little bushings to mount our exhaust. Now, I'm not sure how this will do as far as heat is concerned, but I'm going to give it a shot anyways, even if it's just a temporary solution, to make sure my exhaust is fully mounted. And then I may also use that to mount up the license plate as well. So real quickly here, we just drew up something simple on Creo. We're going to try to just print this out. And I found that I have these grommets here that I've used for other projects for wiring and sheet metal and different things. So what I'm going to try to do is recreate my bushing from Triumph. Sorry about the lighting here. Let's see if I move it over to here. We'll see, I have this original bushing here from Triumph. And I'm going to try to recreate that with my grommet and then my 3D printed plastic kind of insert here to recreate what we have there. So I'm going to print two of these out for each side. It'll just actually kind of sandwich together. So let's give it a shot and see what happens. This will be kind of fun. It'll be our first real automotive type project with the printer here. All right, so we moved it over to our slicer software now, just the Creality software. And I put it at really the highest quality settings I could picture here. Now, I've never really printed something this small, so we'll have to see how it works. If you are interested in some things I've printed, I'll put the link to my Katana print right up here. But we're gonna go ahead and send this over to the slicer, send this over to the printer, and hopefully it just works out for us. If not, I mean, it's only a 4-minute print and it's using pretty much unmeasurable amount of material. So I'm not exactly sure how this will work out, but we'll go ahead and give it a shot. And what do you guys think of our new printer setup here? So this is a table, another video I can put a link to if you guys are interested. But this is a table I built just out of a door and some 2x4s. Perfect for my printer. And as you can see here, we're getting ready to work on some RC cars in the near future. So we got that part loaded up in the print here. Just waiting for everything to get preheated. We'll go ahead and see how this comes out. And we got really lucky with that. So the print only took about 10 minutes with lining up and everything. Let's see if we can get in close here. So again, we're just trying to recreate this piece. So what I did, I have one half here. And now that I know this works, I'll make two of them for either side. We see that drops right into my grommet. Now I have a sleeve for the screw to keep the actual bolt there tight. And it fits in my grommet that now mates up with my piece of metal there. So that's really all we need. I'm gonna go ahead and create 3 more of these. Again, I need 2 for either side. And then we can mock up where our actual side panels will fit. So I can actually tack weld on my brackets for the top mounting locations. So just like that, we got 4 of these pieces printed out. And now I can take them. I've already put the grommet in my piece of metal, and I can just pop that in place, get this one test fitted up, and start figuring out where we're going to need to tack our new brackets on. So now we're getting an idea of the bigger picture here. Again, we're going for that bobber style. This was what I'm saying. We can get the panel mounted as far as that lower bolt, but someone actually bent this tab out of the way, and I can actually, there's no way I've been able to bend that back and get it into the right location. And then we see on the other side here, the tab is actually just missing altogether. We do have another tab here, which I think is for something different. So in both situations, I'm going to cut the tabs off. I'm actually going to attach them just temporarily to the panel itself and re-weld them on the frame in a location where we can actually connect here. So that shouldn't be too much work. Again, the biggest thing will probably just be cutting them off and tacking them back on. So we'll do that, and that should get this side panel mounted, which means we can then go to mounting our seat. And then from there, we can focus on that whole tail section here, that rear fender, and however we're going to mount the different lights. All right, so we got the 2 tabs cut off of the bike frame here. Gonna do a little bit just to straighten them out, clean them up with the sander and whatnot. And I also happen to have a 1/4-inch rod because one of these tabs actually is missing that piece. I have no idea what was going on with this bike, but that's fine because I actually happen to have the exact size rod that I need. So I'll cut the same size little peg that we have here. I'll weld one onto my other bracket, and then I'll get it mocked up on the bike, tack it in place, and then get everything finalized. So there we go, we got our brackets all set here as far as our pegs here for that side panel. And I've already got the side panel somewhat mocked up in place. I'm gonna try to get the back one first. You see I already grounded down the frame as well here. So you see, we'll just get this all lined up and in place. We'll get our first one tacked in, and then I'll go over to this one on the side here. I think that one's gonna be a little bit more tricky. So I'll get my first one in place there, and then I'll do the one in the back second. So I'm super happy with how this came out here. We got our 2 tabs welded on. Let's remember it's just to hold on that little side panel piece, so nothing crazy, nothing super structural there. While we wait for everything to cool off, we're going to move over to our seat. So I'm not sure if I shared this or yet not. We got this seat off of Amazon. I'm really stoked about this. Again, we're going for that bobber kind of theme for the bike here. And that's actually going to work out pretty well. I don't actually want to touch the frame too much. It's still hot. So all we're going to need to do, we see this actually comes with a mount with a little hole here, which actually matches up perfectly with the centered hole we have there for our previous seat. So all I'm going to do is weld a nut to the back of this plate, and I'll be able to put a bolt straight through that hole. And then I'll just need to figure out how I need to mount the back of the seat with our springs. But the front will be very straightforward. So we'll get that done so we can get this kind of mocked up there, and we'll figure out exactly where our seat ends up going. All right, so things are actually moving a lot better than I expected, to be completely honest here. So I actually set up a print just for a small bushing for that seat mount bracket. It's just really fun actually using our 3D printer to print out all these little plastic parts. In the meantime, I'm going to remove that plastic fender guard that we have here. I wasn't actually familiar with this until I started looking in the forums and what some people are doing. And the bike actually looks a lot cleaner if we remove that fender guard. We're going to add in our own custom fender. So we'll get rid of the guard and maybe add in our own little seat pan there. Just to protect those electronics. But let's go ahead, let's pull that, that little fender guard out just to prepare as we start putting things back together here. All right, so we got that plastic fender guard out of here, and I actually got the metal fender. This is one off of Amazon that the previous owner gave with the bike. I got the other fender on there, and it actually looks like we might have something we can work with here. We'll figure that out when we get there. But also what happened is we got our 3D printed bushings all set here. So you can see I have my seat just temporarily mounted, and it has a bolt that goes through here, but no sleeve really for the bolt. So we just 3D printed these to kind of make sure, fill up any of the slop that we have between the bolt and those holes there. So we'll pop that in, and then we'll just start to figure out how the back of the seat is going to mount, and then we can get into the lights and the fenders. So now we have our plastic pieces slid in there. Again, that just gives us a nice little spacer, what I'm referring to as a bushing or a sleeve even, just so the bolt has something to ride in, so it's not just going metal to metal there, and any of that gap isn't being filled up. So we see I'm working here with just my two hands, but we see we can pop this bolt in. I already checked for fitment, so this shouldn't be an issue, but there we go. We'll go ahead and we'll get this on with both our hands. And we can see that all mounted in here now. So I think the next thing we'll go to, and this is really starting to come together, we'll get the seat on. The gas tank on, because we're actually going to need to add a little spacer there where that bolt mounts, because that's also where our gas tank mounts. And then we'll start focusing in on how we're going to mount the seat in the back here. We see on the bottom of the seat we have these two bolt holes, or these two studs here. I just need to set up some type of system so they can mount. It came with some springs. I'm still trying to decide if I want to use the springs or not. But either way, we're going to figure out a way to mount this here. Then we'll decide if we're going to incorporate those springs. All right, so here's everything with the seat, with the gas tank in place. So you see we mounted that up. This is where I mentioned we might need to add in a little spacer here at that bolt. You can see there's a little bit of a protrusion on the sheet metal, so we might just need to make a little washer or something to space that off so it sits flat. And I think what I'm going to do on the back side here is I'm actually going to take this piece of bar stock I have, I'm going to cut it to length, and I'll use that to mount my seat to and my rear fender as well. This rear fender, and I'll send a link to this because the previous owner bought this right off of Amazon. Notice I also got one of my new tail lights kind of mounted on there. So we see here we have two threaded holes. I'm going to use that as another thing that I can mount right on this bar here. And you can see we'll have a lot of contact. I just don't want to mount into this piece because you see this is kind of dimple dyed and there's not really a good location for where I want to put my pin for those springs we have here. I think I'm going to stick with the this type of spring rather than our coil spring here. So what I'll do is I'll cut this to length, and then I'll be able to weld it not only to the frame, but I can also stitch it to this back piece as well to make sure this is super strong. It'll hold the seat, it'll hold the fender, and I'll actually use that as a mounting piece to make my little seat pan in here as well. So first things first, we'll get this rough cut and start figuring out where our pin locations will be and where the fender mounts. And then the last thing will be actually just getting it all tacked welded in there. Now a little bit better idea of what I'm talking about here. You can see I cleared this off. Now this on its own, if I just tacked it on the frame, might be strong enough. We can see I can flex that with my thumb, but once I use this other piece here to reinforce, it's gonna get locked in there, and we're really gonna be able to hold a lot of weight with that piece. So again, from here, I'm gonna mark center. I'll mark my 2 holes for my fender, my 2 more holes for my seat mount, and then we'll get this all tacked on here, and that's really all there would be to it for as far as mounting the seat and the fender. Again, then we'll make our little seat pan, and I'll probably cut my fender to length, because right now it's a little bit too long for what I like. It'll go about here. I think what I'm gonna do is trim it back nice and short here, just give it that nice bobber look. But first things first, we'll get it all mounted up, then it'll always be in the same location. If you actually look very closely, I can't see if you can tell here, but the previous owner actually marked in a line where they thought it should be cut. I actually kind of like how that looks, so what I might do is cut it further up, then use this piece as a template for the right curvature as I get there. But we'll figure that all out as we move along. This might be where I mount my brake light. We see I can put a brake light here, I can have my 2 markers or my 2 blinkers on the side here. And then I'll probably make a little cubby on the back for like a storage parcel, little like maybe my, you know, for a registration or anything like that. And then you see I also got this off of Amazon. I got 2 of these actually. And these are to end the tail section. Now none of them are exact fits for what I'm looking for, but we'll probably between the 2 of them, we'll get something to work. I think I'm gonna stick with more of a hoop end. But what I might need to do, because this is too narrow, is actually cut it in the center and use some of this other one just to fill in the gap and kind of have more of a rectangle than a true circle here. But again, just different things we'll figure out along the way, but you can see all the pieces are coming together. This is like an Amazon special bobber here. Pretty much everything on it was bought off Amazon, which is kind of cool too, because that means everyone kind of has that availability. But you can see we're coming along. We have a plan. It's just gonna take a little bit more work to get there. I love using my caliper so I can measure the overall distance, and I can cut it in half. I can actually lock this in, and I can use that as a scribing tool as well. Something, if you aren't familiar with calipers, it's a great way to mark and actually scribe as well. Now, I wouldn't recommend scribing all the time because it will damage your nice tool here, but so you can see here, I cut in those second holes now for the seat mounts. I'm actually just going to use bolts as my posts, and I threaded this hole because I'm not exactly sure if I want to clamp down on the spring or just use this as a post for the spring to sit on. I'm going to start by coming from the bottom and just let it sit on there, and if I feel like that's a little too sloppy or too loose, then I can always flip the bolt over and just come in from the top and actually clamp that spring down. So we'll do the same thing on the other side. We'll mock it up one more time, and then we'll weld it in. So now my vision is finally coming together here. You can see we have our seat mounted using our posts. Like I said, maybe I'll come in from the top there just in case that hardware is hard to access. But it is nice being able to actually take this on and off if you actually want to use this panel underneath for something. And then see, I also have my fender mounted on there. So we have a fender mount, even got that nice little blinker there. I really like how that blinker looks. You can see it from the kind of the back as well here. And like I said, I'm going to trim that fender back and close the hoop on that rear section, but overall pretty happy with how this is starting to come together here. So we'll tack that in place. I don't think I'll finish weld until the very, very end just to make sure I'm happy with everything. We'll tack that seat bracket in place though, and we'll start moving on to this back section here, figuring out how we're going to trim back that fender and get everything all mounted up with that rear hoop. I decided I'm gonna cover the seat pan here next. You can see just off camera here, I quickly made a little template here with a piece of cardboard. Now all I'm going to do is take it over to my piece of aluminum here. I had some aluminum sitting around in the shop. I think it'd be nice. We'll clean it up so it doesn't look so rough, but we'll use the piece of aluminum, transfer our cardboard template over, and then we'll get it all cut up and bent on our sheet metal brake. And this should be pretty quick here. And that's pretty much the last mechanical thing we'll need to do. From here, it's just wiring up all of the lights and any of that last minute plumbing as far as the coolant, making sure all of our brakes, all of our clutch system is working correctly. All right, so I'm really liking where this is coming here. So we just did a little more work off camera, just making some room here for the bolts and whatnot. What I'm gonna end up doing is actually using my Clecos to set this in place and then use a rib nut to actually use a little bolt to keep that in there. And then I'll reuse my bolt for the fender on the back end to mount here. So it's just gonna take a little more work of kind of fine tuning this piece, getting exactly how we want, and then we'll start figuring out our fasteners. And also, we'll just make sure there's enough clearance so that everything fits when we try to assemble it here. It looks like we might need a small little bend just to meet that angle that we're getting here, just to make sure it sits nice and flush here. So little things, little tweaks, but we'll get there. So we can see things are really starting to come together here. What I added in was a little bit of a cutout to allow for some clearance for the spring. We'll get that fine tuned. And notice I also slotted these holes in the back, so we can now use the same hole as our fender to mount this little seat pan that we have. So I'm pretty happy with this. It actually looks really nice. We will paint it black to match everything else. We're just gonna paint everything at once we have all of our little fabrication work done here. But I think that's actually everything we're gonna do for this video. We're still waiting for a few parts to show up. I ordered a brake light, some other random miscellaneous stuff, so we can actually finish putting everything together. And just before I close out, I forgot to show these Clecos that I was talking about. So these are, people refer to them as temporary rivets. It's a great tool when you're working with sheet metal. You see here, you can basically use it to hold your pieces together with a alignment hole. And now I can work my piece, make sure everything's always aligned the way I want. And when the time comes, I can either use that, replace this Cleco with an actual rivet, or like I'm gonna do, I'll do a nut cert and a bolt instead there. So again, just a really nice tool when you're working on sheet metal pieces to be able to hold things temporarily and then figure out how you wanna join them finally. But it's nice because you can easily take them in and out to take the piece on and off as I kind of fine tune it for final fitment. All right, so I think we're gonna call it on this video. We got the bobber coming along pretty good here. We're just waiting for a few more parts to show up, fine tuning that seat pan, but overall really happy with how things are coming along. The very next video is going to be just getting this all together, and then hopefully after that we'll be coming out with some content with the F100. So make sure you keep a heads up for all that. Thank you for joining in. If you like what you saw, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe for more content, and share with your friends, and hope to see you again soon.